Hello again, Meredith. Hi.
Hello, Stella.
Here we are again, and it's Inside Out.
It is Inside Out Conversations.
Yes. You want to remind?
I know, maybe you've forgotten, or maybe this is your first one. So Stella and I have many years of experience working in a whole range of organisations and different environments. And we have often talked together about some of the challenges, interesting and intriguing things that occur to us while we work in companies. And it triggered an idea for us that it might be nice to share with you from the inside out.
Yes.
How we've dealt with it, so how we from our inside out have dealt with it in order to help your inside be the best that it can be when it's inside out. So there's lots of inside out kind of analogies there.
Fantastic. It's out there now.
It's out.
So last time we were talking about trust, and in the conversation, Meredith did raise the concept of authenticity being important if someone's going to be trusted. And actually that's quite an interesting topic. Funnily enough, I've known Meredith since 2007, and I've known you in particular to bring your own self to any situation. I think anyone out there who knows Meredith will completely say absolutely. Meredith is her Aussie self, no matter where she is. You know, we've been in formal situations, we've been in rooms with very important people, well, you know, and we've been in rock concerts, we've been everywhere, and Meredith is the most authentic person. And you are consistent in that way. So I guess, why is it so important to be authentic?
Yeah, I think, well, at least for me, I think...
You don't play a role. You don't. So why is it important?
Yeah, I think for me there's two things, right? I think on the one hand, you know, and we were talking about trust and that authenticity. If you're authentic, if you are your real self and if you are congruent with who you are, then you are more consistent. So it's actually easier and less time consuming and less stressful actually to be yourself and not to play a role. In fact, I read an article recently where they were talking about the impact of playing a role or not being authentic or being incongruent with yourself on stress and burnout at work.
I can imagine.
It's stressful to be someone who you're not, you know.
I can imagine.
So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is that asking the question why people are not authentic at work.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, because I think...
Why do people need to play a role?
Well, so probably two reasons. I think on one hand, because organisations sometimes set some very high standards and expectations that people have to achieve. But I think the other thing is sometimes people set themselves an unrealistic expectation of who they want to be. Or no, even worse, sometimes deep inside people say, I'm not, you know, they won't like me. I won't fit in if I'm not. Yeah,
belonging.
Yeah,
so
I want to belong.
Playing a role to belong. When in actual fact, being yourself would support you belonging a lot easier, I think, because you would be more natural.
Yeah, especially today when people are talking a lot about this sort of inclusion and belonging as being a core part of what organisations want to achieve.
But I think just going back to what you said about, in a company, whether it's medium, small or large, there are some parameters that are set.
Yeah.
In larger organisations, I mean, if you look at most organisations, they have a set of core values or they have the 6-point frame of behaviours, and there is a compass of some sort, a cultural compass in most large organisations and a lot of medium size, to give a guide on what we stand for. And I think, you know, what that's not about is you need to behave in a certain way. You need to all be clones and display things that set whatever this compass sets out. It's a guide. It's a really, I think most of the time, these things like the 4 core values or whatever they are in whichever company, they are purely a guide to show this is what we stand for. But it does not expect individual people to play a role. And you need to find a way to connect to these things with your own self, I guess.
In principle, I absolutely agree. They're a guide, and in principle, they should be making it easier for people to be authentic. So if you can take some of the, as you say, if they're values or guiding principles or whatever they're called in your organisation, if you can take them and ask yourself the question, how does that manifest for me? You know,
exactly. That's a better way of explaining.
What does that look like for me? It almost makes it safer to be yourself if you can use it that way, right?
Yeah.
Maybe what makes people behave in a disconnected way from themselves is fear that they may lose their job, or fear that they may be told off by their manager.
Or they fear they're not going to belong.
Yeah, or they're going to be embarrassed or humiliated, right?
Yeah.
So,
That's amazing.
And it's a really weird sort of transition. If you're worried about those things and therefore act out of alignment with yourself, the likelihood that people will form a mistrust of you increases.
Yeah.
That mistrust almost provides a feedback loop to you that says, I'm not making it work. I have to do something different.
Yeah.
I wonder if spending time and energy, if people really found the inner them and said, you know, what brings me joy at work? What are the things about myself that I really love? So you said about me that I'm the Aussie, you know.
Yeah.
Actually, I have toned down my Aussie because I do know that when you work in an international environment, you must wonder how bad it is when it's not toned down. But but when you work in an international environment, I think you have to be aware, one, what are the things that you bring that are really, you know, related to your home culture?
And why should you leave that behind?
Yeah, not leave it behind, but make it relevant to the environment. And that's where the values.
Trick. And I think that is the trick, because that brings to the next thing of really holding on to what some people might have that is not acceptable behavior. But then they say, that's me, that's who I am. Accept me for what I am. I want to be rude and straightforward. And you need to accept me for who I am. So what do you think about
because
that?
I have a brilliant example around that. So
Tell me.
I was running a program a few years ago, and a large group of people, senior managers, and one fellow in there who was from Northern England, who was honestly swearing and cussing and F-bombing everywhere, like every 5 minutes. Everything he had to say was really enhanced with expletives.
Never mind.
I'm not going to share those expletives, even though I'm Australian. See how it works, you know.
Play the role.
But at some point, one of the other team members, who also has a right to be herself, raised the topic with me. She said, along the lines of she has a strong commitment to her religion and she doesn't appreciate these words being used, which I absolutely respect.
So
why should she not?
Had to do something about it then.
So I approached him and said to him, listen, maybe you can tone it down so that others are not offended. And he goes, I don't have to do this, you know. This is who I am. This is me. You know, you're talking to us about authentic leadership. This is the authentic me. But it did make me think, you know, to be fair to him, in the end, he did tone it down, but it did make me think, it's not about not being yourself. It's about being the best version of yourself in the context in which you're working. So not selling your soul out, not being something that you're not. But I talked to him about he can still be authentic without using expletives, right? The same as you can still enjoy going out for dinner although you're a beach bunny, you don't wear bikinis to the posh restaurant, right?
Yeah.
There are norms and rules and things.
And a code of ethics.
Exactly.
So there should be a line drawn, but generally, above that line, you can really be yourself.
Yeah. And I think the other important thing about being yourself is why sometimes, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I really want to deep dive in why sometimes people are not themselves, because I think it's a dangerous place. Not only is it stress creating for you and difficult for the individual, it's also difficult for people around you, particularly if you're a leader.
Yeah.
If you're constantly battling with a challenge of how do I manage my reputation, my perception, my brand, and that's incongruent with who you are, the stress that creates on others around you is awful.
Yeah.
And I think, if you're struggling with that at the moment, taking the time to really deep dive and look inside and say, when I'm at my best, when I'm at my real best, what am I doing? Because I would almost guarantee you when you're at your best, you're being authentic.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think?
I totally agree. And I think it's such an interesting topic, but I also want to just say that you mentioned earlier about being driven by fear, but there's also sometimes ego-driven aspects. What do you think about people promoting themselves when you know that some of that has been couched in a way that's not, it's a little bit far from the reality.
A bit false. And
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I think everyone's seen it in this day and age of social media, right? How many times have we looked at a post on one or the other place and gone, oh? Yeah. Really? I did see one colleague once who positioned themselves next to a famous person using a Photoshop and sort of, without saying it overtly, suggested that they had been, involved in a session with them.
That's also a little bit far-fetched.
Far-fetched, yeah. But I think I hear quite a lot, particularly when I'm coaching, people say, I'm not comfortable with self-promotion. I'm not comfortable with... And I wonder, has that got something to do with not feeling that I'll be inauthentic if I do that? That's an interesting
thing. So that's the opposite of promoting yourself with frills and adding on, but this not having the confidence or feeling that you can showcase yourself. Because I call that promoting showcasing, and that can be a very good thing.
Yeah.
Especially for the company you work for and for your team, even if you're not a manager, you're an individual contributor, but you post things and you're so excited and you show your passion, and it's about showcasing the value the team are adding and what you're working on. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I don't think that's lacking authenticity.
No. In fact, I think it's very authentic.
Yeah.
And it contributes to building confidence in your competence.
Exactly,
right?
That's fantastic.
As long as it in itself is authentic.
And it's not for everybody. There might be some people that they would find it cringeworthy to put something on.
Maybe, but I think that would suggest that they need to also reflect then why.
Yeah.
Because again, why is it cringeworthy to say, you know what I achieved today? Boom.
Yeah, and that's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. But you do need some confidence in yourself to do that. And there's a fine line. It's not arrogance. It's really just we're adding value and we're proud and we feel purposeful. Basically, that's what that's about.
Purpose. Purpose is another one we should talk about.
Definitely.
That purpose for self and purpose for work.
Yeah.
But you triggered one more last thought that I think is useful when you were talking about showcasing. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for your team.
Exactly.
Right? So it doesn't need to be that the leader, for example, does it themselves, but I think showcasing your team is a way of recognising them, and also it is really important, actually.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I think to sum up, I would actually like to ask you a question as a person who I think is really representing authenticity in wherever you are. What do you think are the elements that will help a person to be authentic?
Yeah.
For example, is confidence one?
Yeah.
is self-understanding one.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are the elements?
Right.
So you can describe yourself now, because what helps you to be authentic?
Yeah.
Do you need to care a little bit less? I don't know. What do you think?
Okay. No, I think there's a couple of core things. I think on the first hand, it's do more for you and less for others. And what do I mean by that? I mean, really look inside yourself and say, who am I? Believe in yourself. Love yourself. Love your little heart. Like, you know, just love your little heart. You know, you all have something amazing to bring to work. Look in there and find it, and then build it up, you know, really build it out. I think that's one. You know, the moment you start doing things for others more than yourself is a very risky moment for authenticity.
Playing a role.
Including playing a role.
For someone else.
Yeah. I think the other thing about being authentic is taking the time to consider your purpose and being quite mindful about that. And purpose is not creating a brand. Purpose is finding your inner values and your inner strength, right?
The value is the word.
Yeah. Who are you? How do you want people to describe you? Not in a story, but in a that's going to make you go, yes, I'm that person, you know.
It's amazing.
But I think the other thing with authenticity is monitoring those around you and seeing how they react and respond to the person you are. Are you getting the reactions and the responses you want?
Yeah.
Or are you getting walls put up and questions being asked?
Because you would know then if you were below the line of the code of norms.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess to sum that up, and I'll just use abstract nouns, the first one is really about validation of who you are.
Yep.
Right, so that's the first one. The second one is, you know, you mentioned love your heart, and it's also about having a good self-awareness of who you are and who you feel comfortable with being. So self-awareness. The third one that Meredith kind of connected with was being aware of your environment and the people in your environment and how they're responding. And so be yourself, but of course work within the environment and adapt yourself accordingly without playing a role and without losing your authenticity.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think when we come together next time, we should try and talk about purpose. I think purpose is an important one.
Without purpose,
it's a superpower, right?
No point, right? So for the next time, purpose it is.
We'll stick some links and do some things to help you find more information about authenticity.
And bringing yourself to work.
And we look forward to a clever conversation. We look forward to an inside-out conversation soon.
Which is a clever conversation.
It is, yeah.
Good.
You're clever.
Cheers.
Bye.